Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shubbak Festival, one of the world's largest festivals of contemporary Arab culture. I'm Alia Alzougbi, and I'm speaking to you today from North London, and I'm really excited to be your host for today's event. Every 2 years, Shubbak Festival brings London audiences an amazing range of art and culture, online as well as in many places across the UK. So just a couple of months ago, in June, July, Shubbak ran its last iteration of the festival with theatre, visual arts, music, and dance. Whichever of these art forms you're interested in and would be curious to see, you can find out more on shubbak.co.uk as part of our digital platform, What's Online. But today, we're here with two inspirational Arab women artists in this webinar, Walk With Us, the second of 3 special webinars for young people produced with the support of Qatar Foundation International. So, over the next half an hour, we're going to be traveling to Beirut and to Glasgow to hear from Lisa Luxx and Sara Shaarawi, who are going to talk to us about how they, as Arab women, are challenging the existing patriarchal systems of society. Patriarchy describes the power relationship between men and women, where society gives men more power so that they dominate roles in society. And so the relationship ends up unequal. But not only that, it also leads to dependency, oppression, and violence. So first, we'll spend some time in Glasgow speaking with Sara Shaarawi, a playwright. Then we'll cruise over to Beirut in Lebanon to hear from Lisa Luxx, a poet and activist. Both Luxx and Sara have shared thought-provoking artworks for Shubbak Festival this year, and they've stretched audiences' understanding not only of the Arab world, but of how we as human beings anywhere in the world question and confront our place in it. They've both prepared for a very special encounter with you. After we hear from them, there will be some time for questions and answers. So please formulate any questions that come to your mind. You'll see a button at the bottom of your screen that says Q&A. If you have any questions you want to ask Sara and Luxx, please, please, please write them there. Or if you're with teachers or other adults, you can ask them to write them too. When you do ask questions, please type in where you're writing from as well. It's great that we have over 25 schools registered for today, and we'd love to know how many regions are here. I'm also really delighted to welcome Sumaya Sitayib today as our British Sign Language interpreter, who's going to make sure this discussion is as accessible as possible. Okay. I'm going to stop talking now and welcome our first wonderful artist joining the room. Sara, hello.
Hi.
Hello, it's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for being with us here today from Glasgow.
Thanks for having me.
So Sara, can you tell us a bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So my name is Sara Shaarawi. I'm a playwright from Cairo. That's where I'm from. That's where I grew up. But I'm currently based in Glasgow, and I've been living in Scotland for the past 10 years. And I've been writing plays since 2013.
And you created Niqabi Ninja, your first play ever. Can you tell us a bit about what it's about and what spurred you to write it in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Niqabi Ninja is the very first play I wrote, as you mentioned. It's a play that began in 2013, and it started off as a rapid response piece. Rapid response writing is when you respond to an event, usually a news event, by writing a short piece that's almost immediately performed. The writing is usually rough and ready. sorry. And the focus is the writer's response rather than a developed plot or narrative. So it's not as polished as playwriting usually is. And in 2013, I was asked to write something for a feminist festival for new writing in Glasgow. And at the time, what was happening in Cairo were demonstrations. So we were still very much in the sort of Arab Spring moment still. And women in demonstrations were being attacked. And there were reports and testimonies coming out of violent attacks on women particularly. This was something I had a really emotional and visceral response to. So I wrote a monologue about a Cairene woman who's fed up with the constant violence that women endure in Cairo. And these attacks are the last straw for her. So she buys a niqab and some weapons and makes the decision that she will fight back.
And can you tell us about the journey that the piece went through to come to be in the shape that it is today?
Yeah. Yeah, so initially, as I said, it was a monologue, and it was really well received in Glasgow. So I was encouraged to write a full length play, and that's what I did. So the second iteration is a traditional play. And at the time, I was really interested in hearing about all these Muslim female superheroes that were coming out. So the Egyptian online comic Qahira, the Pakistani cartoon Burqa Avenger, Miss Marvel came out then, or at least that's when I heard about her. So I became really interested in comic books as an aesthetic to tell the story. The Kabi Ninja went from a monologue to a play about a young woman who's an illustrator, and she's creating a comic that documents her experiences with harassment from men, mainly men in public. And at the same time, she's having this conversation with a fantastical vigilante character that she's created called the Niqabi Ninja. And the ninja is keen for revenge. So as Hannah, that's the main character, is struggling to reclaim her narrative, she's also struggling with feelings of how she will respond to these incidents. And it becomes about her journey towards being the vigilante superhero character that she's created. Structurally, it's an origin story. And then from there, the year we, finally decided or were able to put it on, the pandemic happened. And me and my team had a discussion about whether we should try to create a show that doesn't take place in a theater. And this is when I mentioned I was interested in two things: audio drama and the intersection between walking and performance. We felt that it would add layers into the play because so much of it takes place in the street and public spaces. So the play became an audio drama that people will listen to while taking a walk in their city. And there were a couple of decisions that we were keen to hold on to as well. There was the visual experience of Hannah's work that felt really important. So we decided that on the route that people walk along, there would be certain spots where the audience encounter images from Hannah's comic. And I think we'll have some images, here. So we worked with an illustrator from Egypt, Jihan Munir, who created these brilliant comic book images from what we're listening to. So what we wanted to create basically was a walk into a comic book world, in a sense. And we collaborated with two Egyptian artists, which was another dimension that felt really important to the production. We collaborated with Jihen on these brilliant images, and we also collaborated with a musician, Balkis, who composed the music.
I mean, these visuals are so striking, and I also wish we could share some of your writing with our participants today, because it's just so striking, not only your ability to bring that character to life, but also, as you said, how you then interpreted it into a street walk, which is such a visceral experience. Now, although you can't share your writing, I know that you've prepared an exercise for our participants here today so that they can build their own characters. So now's the time for our participants. If you've got a pen or paper, or if you're in front of a laptop or a computer, a Word document ready, Sara's about to take us on an exciting exercise.
Great. Yeah, so I thought I'd share a writing exercise with everyone. It's an exercise about building characters. As a writer, characters where I like to start personally. It's the beating heart of my work. It's a really easy exercise. It's one that I use in workshops very often, and it's the one exercise where you discover that you can write. Everyone can write. You can do this at your own time. The most important thing is that you don't overthink it. Just follow your intuition. If you feel like you don't know what you're doing or where this is going, then that's perfect. You're doing it right. Great. So the exercise starts with, first, choose a name. Random, don't worry, don't overthink it. And once you have your name, I'm gonna ask 10 questions and answer these questions one after the other in the order that they're in. Okay, so question number 1. What's their age? Question 2. What is the color of their hair? Question 3. When was the last time they said, I love you? Question 4. What are they most proud of? Question 5. What would be their superpower? Question 6. What's the food they hate the most? Question 7. What do they love to do when they're on their own? Question 8. What's their biggest fear? Question 9. What's on their mind right now? Question 10. Where are they now? And a bonus question just to be on theme. Question 11. If they had a superhero alter ego, what would be their name? And after you've answered all the questions, I want you to write a short monologue. Take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just write. Don't think about it too much. Write a monologue in the voice of your character. And that's it. You can write your own set of questions. You can add to the ones that I have. These are the ones that I like to use. You can adapt the exercise in ways that feels useful.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sara, for such an interesting exercise. I was answering the questions in my head as well, because otherwise it would have taken me to another world and I would have lost track here. But thank you so much for joining us today. And
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Sara, I mean, it's just so great to have this exercise. And, actually, if anyone would like to share the name of their character's superhero alter ego, so if you've done this exercise, I know it was quite snappy, but you might remember Sara said it was a rapid response kind of exercise. So you might have felt like you didn't have enough time, but that was the point of it. And we would really, really, really love to hear from you and see your work. So we're going to be sharing our email at the end of this session. If you'd like to share your monologues that you go off and spend some time writing, or maybe even you'd like to send us a sketch of them because those illustrations were also so striking. Please, please, please take that email, send it to us. We would love to see your work. Now, just a reminder, if you do have any questions for Sara, please pop them in the Q&A section. We're going to be answering your questions, but Don't forget to give us your name also and which part of the UK you are currently in. And if you're even from abroad, we'd love to know as well. You can find that button at the bottom of your screen, just a reminder. And we will have time to go through a few of those questions, not all of them, just because of time, okay, at the end. Next up, we are going to Beirut to speak with Lisa Luxx. Hello, Luxx. Hi.
Hi.
How good to see you.
And you.
We're going to get straight into it, Luxx. You recently published a brilliant book of poetry. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so my latest book of poetry, which is called Fetch Your Mother's Heart, it's an exploration of grief and longing as experienced through the time of the Lebanese Revolution in 2019. So the Lebanese Revolution was a time when the people of Lebanon rose up against unemployment, corruption, food scarcity, and so many more social concerns. So the collection goes right up until after the Beirut blast in 2020, which is when a large amount of ammonium nitrate that was stored at the port of Beirut, which is the capital of Lebanon, it exploded. And that caused, what's recorded is 218 deaths, 7,000 injuries, and around 300,000 people homeless. It also wiped out neighborhoods and businesses, as well as futures. So I wrote this book from my own perspective, through the lens of a mixed heritage daughter of its diaspora, who was returning to the region while navigating a queer relationship across borders.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many rich poems in the book, and I wondered if you could share one of them with us and talk us through the decisions that shaped it.
Yeah, I'd love to talk you through a poem called Definitions of Hunger. So the reason is that, firstly, this poem depicts a shocking incident in Lebanon, which was during one of the feminist protests. So this is where women came together to protest against gender violence, and a man who was suffering extreme poverty walked into a dance performance by these feminist activists, and he set himself alight. Now, he did this as a form of protest against the state, and it's something that was becoming commonplace at the time. Now, don't worry, he did survive and he was looked after. But what this poem does in exploring that moment is it redefines 3 words that run throughout the poem. Now, I'm going to tell you why I did that before we begin. So there's a poet called Emily Yoon, and she said that poetry is an escape from the language that governs us. So what does this mean? It means that language can limit our ability to express ourselves entirely until we start getting creative with it. So what this poem attempts to do is break free of language in order to confuse the reader as much as the incident confused all of us who were present, but also to defy authority. If we think of language as authority, the more creatively you use it, the more you are resisting. So this poem is a protest against all oppressions and against anyone who might take our rights and dignity away. So definitions of hunger. In this poem, silence means the opposite of eating. Eat means the act of singing, and handprint means what happens after silence. Some feminists came painted old silence's handprint across their mouth. A mother-age stranger thumbs up my banner. No is a complete sentence. Ha. Rubbing my back now, we walk side by side. No words exchange, we face up, tide fighting sky. Chance, I pronounced wrong, I meant right. Moon couldn't sleep, hung belly full at 3:33. We're dancing, laughing, clapping, dancing when man beside me pours gasoline on himself and eats. Trailed home silence from the ashes of shins. Kettle boiled 3 times, forgot to brew tea. Ha. Prepared ramen with handprints still clinging to me.
Wow, Luxx, that poem is so powerful, really. And probably part of the reason that there's so much to your poetry is that apart from being a poet, you're an activist too.
That's right. So I split my time basically 50-50 between my paid work as a writer and my time to grassroots activism or community engagement. I think it's important that when we take from society to write, we also give back consistently. So most prominently for me, that has been working to set up things like a free childcare for migrant women, single mothers in Beirut. So these are women who have no rights awarded to them, given to them, and they live way under the poverty line in really desperate conditions. So what the childcare does is it gives them work opportunities, and it gives them some of their independence back that was taken away through aid distribution. So another initiative, for example, that I founded is Illa Beirut, which is an international organization that offers free mental health care to people in Lebanon who were affected by the traumas of the past 2 years. So among that, I also do source and distribute medicine, food, and rent for people below the poverty line in Lebanon and Syria. So I really believe that time is your most finite and therefore your most valuable resource in this world. So you can think of it really as an act of your humanity to use your time away from just making money, you know? So, you know, what do activism and poetry have in common? Well, the way I see it is that they both seek to create worlds. And one way of playing with this is to touch upon dream language. So dreams are made up of this series of images that lay on top of one another in our minds, right? And when they lay on top of one another, we organize them somehow into these narratives. We create narratives from this selection of images. Now, poems do the exact same thing. Poems are like fragments of dreams, and activists do the exact same thing, but with ideas.
I'm just thinking, Luxx, I know that you have an exercise prepared for everyone. So inviting everyone again to open up your screens and your, or bring a paper and a pen. And Luxx is going to take us through an activity that speaks to exactly what she was speaking here about language and creating dream worlds as well. So over to you, Luxx, for that one.
Yeah, okay, so I'm going to walk you guys through a creative writing practice. And what I want you to do is similar to what Sara said, is, and this is a key to our writing, but don't overthink it. Okay, so if you get confused by my explanation, just trust yourself and do your thing. Play with it. It's all about play. Okay. So what do I want you to do first? Create 5 columns on your page or on your screen, however you want to do it. In your first column, write a word. I would advise you to write a noun, so an object or a thing. For example, water. These make it easier when we use nouns. Okay, so you have your first word, yeah? Don't think too hard about it, just write a thing. Right, your second column, you're gonna write a word that associates with the first word, but it's not an immediate association. So we're aiming for loose association. We're aiming for something that doesn't belong in the direct family of words, but that isn't, you know, completely far off and unconnected from the original word. So if you can see my diagram here with example 1, what we have is within the small circle is kind of the immediate associations of water, right? So you've got like, you know, tap, drink, sea, wet. These are the immediate, easy things that you could say in response. But what we're looking for is the words within the bigger circle, which are loose association. It allows us more and more room to play. So, for example, if I wanted to put water in my first column, I could put seeds in my second column. Because if I'm thinking of a scene, I could think of somebody, watering seeds. I could think of somebody coughing and needing water. So coughing could be my word. I could think of somebody observing their reflection in a lake. So reflection could be my word. You see how we're thinking a little bit outside of the box with our association. So this is what you're going to do. In your third column, you're going to associate with the word that's in your second column. So if you chose, for example, water, seeds, your third column then moves forward from the word seeds. And then you do your fourth column in the same way and your fifth column in the same way. So let me just give you another example, and I'm going to show you how it comes together and what we do with it. So I started with the word language. Now, what does language make me think of? It makes me think of separation from countries. So I put the word ocean in my second column. Now, what does ocean make me think of? Growing, sea levels are rising. So I put grow in my third column. What does growing make me think of? Like rivers, which are always in pursuit of growing. So I put rivers. Now, what did rivers make me think of? Ancestors. Because when we trace rivers back to a source, it's much like we do with our heritage and with our ancestors. So my 5 columns look like this: language, ocean, grow, river, ancestors. So once you have your 5 words, you start to rearrange them and play with them. And you start to say to yourself, okay, I'm going to create 6 lines where I use all of these words. And what it does is you end up with quite surprising and innovative imagery within which you still stay close to the original idea at the core of your poem. So let me demonstrate by telling you the lines that I came up with from those 5 words. We learn languages from our mothers. Arabic was my father tongue. I watched the ocean, one eye covered by my dad's palm. Another day passes where no brilliance grows inside me. How embarrassing to trail river from your shoe while walking through concrete. My throat won't fit around my ancestors. So take it and play with it as you wish, and hopefully we can see some of them.
Thank you so much, Luxx. And we actually have a couple of minutes, so you can have a go right now, at least coming up with your 5 words in the 5 columns. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to start that process so that when this session is over, you have something that you can start from and create a poem yourself. So just for a couple of minutes, we'll sit in silence and give you space to come up with your 5 words. Okay, so I hope you came up with your 5 words there and maybe even started to write your poems as well. But again, thanks so much to Luxx and to Sara for taking us through these exercises. And it's worth saying that we are recording this session. So if you missed the exercises, really, there's no need to worry. We will share the video after and you can look over it in your own time. But a reminder now, if you have any questions for Luxx or Sara, please press that button and put your questions in. They've really got us thinking about questions around who holds the power? How do we use art to resist authority? And how do we try to rebalance and express our own resistance, even fury, through the arts as well? So anything that you might have for them, whether you're considering a career in the arts or not, please do put your questions in the Q&A, the button that allows you to send us your questions. But also a reminder that once you go off and write your poems or your monologues, we would love to see them. We really, really would. So do send them to us at info@shubbak.co.uk. That's info@shubbak.co.uk. And we will try and put some on our website as well. Okay, so welcome back, Luxx and Sara. It's really, really good to have you with us. I think that our participants have been so busy. You've kept them busy with your exercises, like they have been quite, consuming and took up time. So I'm going to kick off with a question, actually, and we'll see if any others come through as well. And I wondered for both of you, sometimes it can feel like everyone has written everything already, So as a writer, especially as a budding young writer coming out, it's very hard to find your own voice when everything seems to have been written. Do you have any advice around, how you kind of can pursue finding your own voice through your writing?
I would say in response to that not everything has been written. If you haven't lived before in this body and in this experience with the exact track record that you have of your life, then that's a story that hasn't been written. So as far as we're aware, you haven't. So I do believe that everybody has myriad stories inside them, but only they can tell it their way. So I think really tapping into understanding what your position is in this world, what your place is in this world, and speaking from that point of view and that point of view alone, then you really create a very valuable voice.
Yeah, same. I totally agree. Yeah, that's such a beautiful response, Luxx. I always say, like, talking about language, for example, I always say I'm really interested in accents and in like authentic. People always talk about authenticity and accents and so on. And for me, accents is really interesting because it tells people's stories. So like someone would say, oh, I don't sound like I'm from here. I don't sound. And this used to be a huge knot for me, for example, growing up in Egypt, because I'm mixed. So my mom's Italian. I've got quite a complicated relationship to language. And in Egypt, we say it's not in for me language. But growing older, for me, language became it's a way to tell your story, and it's really unique. It says where you've been, who you've grown up with, what you're watching, who you're engaging with. And I think telling stories, as long as you're telling them authentic as in, I don't like the word authenticity actually, if you tell them honestly, if you're exploring yourself honest, if the way you engage with the world is uniquely yours, and that is compelling and that is interesting. And even if, it's that thing of like, something might happen, and everyone who saw that incident happen tell their story, even if they're speaking about the same thing, they'll each have their own way of communicating it, of telling that story, of understanding it, of engaging with it. So yeah, in a very convoluted way, I completely agree. I think it's not, don't, even, so what, even if you feel like that's been written or that's been said, you haven't told that story yet. So tell it. If you want to tell it, tell it.
I love that what you said about language, if I may return on that point as well, because for example, there's a poem in my collection where the collection deals as well with my tricky relationship with language as well, and with Arabic being mixed. And so there's one poem which is based on mishearing things and getting words mixed up, you know, even like getting Hamud and Hamut mixed up, and so thinking, you know, so calling like a pip a will die pip, you know, because like we're mishearing. Now there's a poet, her name escapes me now, she's an American poet. Actually, no, there's another, sorry, it's Alia Alzougbi, who's an Iranian American poet, and she talks a lot and has written an essay about when we mishear things, use it. Like that's part of it. So even your mishearing is part of your voice. Even if you hear something wrong, make a note of it. If it's come up with an interesting phrase for you, or what I call illegitimate poetry, it's part of your interpretation of the world. So as much as the way that you get language wrong, in like an academic sense, in creative writing, you can't get language wrong. Because as I was saying, like language is yours to creatively break down and deconstruct and redefine. So yeah, I really like what you're saying there.
And it's so great also to hear and affirm this idea that no one like you has ever been born before, and no one like you will ever come again. So every one of our participants, when they write, there is a way and an interaction with their writing where they're really capturing something no one could possibly ever capture. And that little jewel of a tip you gave, Sara, of just be honest about it, because sometimes what it can feel like with the writing is it can feel like we have to sound like some of these great writers who came before us. And that's what great writing sounds like. So we feel like we have to echo them, and that can be very limiting. And not least because you, Sara, and Luxx are quite intent on well, let's call it what it is, bringing down the patriarchy. So really just ensuring that we are on equal grounds. And unfortunately, also when it comes to writing, when you think of the great writers or the geniuses of literature, it's men that tend to come up because they have the biggest platform. So I wondered what advice you had in terms of where our young audiences can go and find some inspirational poetry by women or non-binary folk who are from the global majority, so not necessarily from Europe, but from other parts of the world. So whether that's names you can recommend for them to go and check out, or also where they can go and find out other voices that they don't encounter regularly.
I mean, for me, for theater, it's a little bit difficult at the moment, because we've got, particularly in the region known as Middle East and North Africa, like we've got a bit of an issue with documentation, just because it's quite a recent thing. There's been a movement towards documenting, but even documentation, I'm not sure where to access. Like I see a lot of work, and Shubbak, I think, is a great resource, to be honest, in terms of like platforming, but also pointing people in direction of resources, because that's an issue that I come back to whenever I'm in Egypt. It's an issue that we're always talking about. It's like, we need an archive, we need a library, we need something that people can go to that doesn't quite exist yet. We don't have a library, we don't have, so I can recommend names, but in terms of like plays or theater or performances, there's also like safety issues and so on and so forth. But like off the top of my head, a brilliant writer that works with verbatim is Rafael Khouri. He's a trans writer. He's brilliant, does lots of documentary. I think there's work published in English, not sure about whether there's work published in Arabic. I saw a brilliant one-woman show by Hanan Haj Ali, who's also a big performer and actor. There's loads of theater companies like Shubbak, is it Shubbak in Lebanon? Every time I think about it in English, I'm like, oh no, how do you pronounce it in Arabic? Yeah, there's in Egypt, there's a lot of really good contemporary dance, which you might be able to find on YouTube. There is Sundus, if you're interested particularly in work around women, Sundus Shubbak's Bussi project does a lot with women's stories, and particularly in a context where it was really taboo to talk about women and, you know, the what is known as women's issues, which is not a sentence I like to use. But, you know, she did that work back when like times have changed. And I think the internet has really been fruitful in that. But I think YouTube, yeah, sort of going on to, there's a lot of magazines now, like Maikali and a number of Arabic publications that write about gender, about sexuality. They publish poetry, they talk about artists. So I would definitely just go on all these online, there's a lot online that you can find that is really inspiring and doing the work that growing up in Egypt as a teenager, I would have absolutely loved to have. And every time there's a new publication or new article or new piece of work, I'm like, oh, wow. Wow. Yeah. So there's a lot out there. I'm sorry that I'm not like naming specific artists just because I feel like it, yeah, I can't immediately recommend, but I can definitely have a think and send names through.
No, you definitely did recommend some names. Thank you so much, Sara. What about luxx? Any tips there for expanding the repertoire?
Definitely, yeah. Another magazine is a Zima magazine as well, which is published in the UK, and it's a really cool one to check out. It's spelled AZEEMA in English, a Zima magazine. I think they have an online platform as well as print. Check out Hammam Radio as well. It's a underground feminist radio which you can find online, and there's a lot of shows that are both in English and in Arabic. Some of them are purely music, some of them are literary. They're all very, very, very feminist. It's a really brilliant radio station. When we look to our heritage, our history, I'd say that you cannot move through life without reading Alia Alzougbi. Get some of Alia Alzougbi's books on your bookshelf, or make sure they're in your school. Really great feminist revolutionary from Egypt, who said that the artist must be a dissident. The artist therefore must be revolutionary at all times. And finally, I'd like to recommend a friend who's a really brilliant playwright and poet in the UK, and also mixed heritage. And she's called Sabrina Mahfouz, and she does some really, really great theatre that I think you guys like for your age range and what you're into, assuming that you're into what we're talking about, and you'll really like her work a lot.
Yeah, she's brilliant, Sabrina.
Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. So many recommendations, and I hope the teachers attending this session also managed to make note of some of these recommendations to diversify what our young people are exposed to in terms of literature and the possibilities that are out there for different views of the world. Luxx and Sara, thank you so much for joining us today. What a rich session. I can feel, I don't know about you participants, I feel like my brains have been squeezed, so I can make some brain juice today. So I'm actually going to go and do some writing in a little bit because I feel like really warmed up. So thank you again, Sara and Luxx. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please do go to shubbak.co.uk to find out more about other artists also who have been working and whose work we have been showcasing. And don't forget to send us your work at info@shubbak.co.uk. We would absolutely love to see it.